Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been keeping an eye on the auto world, well, you know the electric vehicle market has just been buzzing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for a few years there, it really felt like this wide open road, didn't it?
Totally. Just pure optimism. Consumer interest was surging, big government investments. Looked like a smooth ride ahead for EVs. But lately, the road seems like it's gotten, well, a bit bumpy.
That's a good way to put it.
Our latest research points to a pretty significant shift happening. We're seeing costs go up, government incentives, they're being pulled back noticeably.
Right.
And consumers, they seem to be looking much more closely at affordability now.
Which makes sense.
So it's this challenging new landscape, especially, I think, for automakers like Rivian, who really rode that first wave of excitement.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We want to kind of pull back the curtain and really unpack the specific pressures Rivian is dealing with right now.
And what it means for them going forward? Precisely. We've gathered, a stack of recent articles, some deep research, looked into their latest strategic moves, trying to give you the full picture.
Okay, and our mission here, like always, is to take all this info and boil it down, get you the most important nuggets.
Yep.
We want you to walk away feeling like you really get what's happening with Rivian's future, hopefully with some surprising facts and enough context to keep things interesting.
This is good.
So, okay, let's unpack it. What exactly is causing this turbulence in the EV market overall, and how is it hitting a company like Rivian specifically?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how fast things have shifted. We've definitely gone from that, like you said, high optimism to facing some, well, pretty serious headwinds now. The core challenge, it really comes down to three main things.
Okay.
One, operational costs for the automakers are going up. Two, those government incentives that really kind of juice the market.
Yeah.
They're being reduced or in some cases removed entirely. And three, there's this growing consumer demand for, well, cheaper vehicles, more budget-friendly options.
Makes sense.
And Rivian, being a key American-based EV maker, they are right in the crosshairs of all three of those shifts.
Wow. Okay. That's a challenging mix. And speaking of costs, the research really flags tariffs as a big one.
Yes.
Now, Rivian's a U.S. company, right, based in Illinois. So how are these international trade policies still causing such a headache for them?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of, modern manufacturing. A couple of months back, former President Trump announced some pretty significant tariffs aimed right at automakers and their supply chains.
Right, I remember that.
And while Rivian does build its vehicles in Illinois and they try to source domestically, their CEO, R.J. Scaringe, talked about this back in April. He explained just how complex these auto supply chains are. Well, he said something like, one of the things with automotive is the supply chain is so complex where we have hundreds of suppliers providing parts.
Okay.
And those suppliers have suppliers, and then in turn, those suppliers have suppliers. So there's tier 2, tier 3.
Ah, okay. Layers upon layers.
Exactly. And what that means, really, is that it's nearly impossible for any big automaker to get everything from U.S. vendors. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. So what's the direct hit for Rivian then?
Well, according to Scaringe, it means their vehicles are getting more expensive by up to a couple of $1,000s per vehicle.
A couple of thousand? Ouch.
Yeah. So the key thing here is even if it says made in America, you can't fully escape these global trade ripples.
Especially when their trucks aren't cheap to begin with, right? The R1T starts around $70,000.
Exactly. Around $70,000.
Yeah.
So passing on more costs, that could really dampen demand, particularly when you've still got these elevated interest rates keeping some buyers, on the sidelines, as they say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's uncertainty, too, right? We don't know how long these tariffs will last or what the long-term impact will be. But what's clear is they're already adding this negative pressure right now.
That's a really interesting point about how tangled up these global supply chains are. Makes it impossible to be totally insulated. And, okay, as if tariffs weren't enough hassle, we're also seeing big shifts with government incentives.
All right, another layer.
The material we looked at suggests a real pivot away from the kind of support that helped kickstart the EV market. What's happening there? And what's the Rivian angle?
Well, for a few years, the U.S. government definitely played a big part, used incentives to boost the industry. But the recently passed budget reconciliation bill, it actually removes the $7,500 tax credit for new EVs at the end of 2025.
Ah, okay. But wait, didn't Rivian's vehicles not qualify for that anyway because they were too expensive?
Technically, yes. Their trucks and SUVs, because of the price point, didn't qualify directly. But there was this kind of clever leasing loophole.
A loophole.
Yeah, it let customers effectively claim that credit indirectly through leasing. And, well, that loophole is gone now.
Gotcha. So that could definitely cost them some customers who are maybe counting on that break.
Could do, yeah. It removes one potential pathway to making the price seem a bit more manageable for some buyers.
Okay. And then there's the charging infrastructure issue too, right?
Yes, and the plot, as they say, thickens there. The federal government is actually being sued right now by more than a dozen states.
Sued? Over what?
Over its attempt to pull back about $5 billion in funding that Congress had already authorized during the Biden administration, specifically for EV charging infrastructure.
Wow, okay. So money that was meant to build more chargers might not get there?
Well, it's a legal fight. A federal judge did recently order the funds to be distributed, so that's one step. But the legal battle itself, it's not quite over yet.
So there's still uncertainty there.
There is. And if you connect the dots, you've got tax incentives for buying EVs disappearing. And at the same time, this back and forth over funding for the chargers, you need to use the EVs.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great for the industry overall.
It does not bode well, no. Look, a really robust charging network and probably some continued incentives are pretty crucial if EVs are going to reach mass adoption, and lower the costs associated with owning one.
Right.
So all this uncertainty makes it tougher for Rivian and others, frankly, to convince that broader group of consumers to make the switch.
It really sounds like Rivian is dealing with just a really challenging external environment right now.
It is, yeah.
But the reports we dug into, they also point to a pretty critical strategic move the company's making. So what's their plan to, navigate these headwinds, especially thinking about new models?
Right, because they aren't just sitting still. Now, if you look at their recent Q2 numbers, production and deliveries, they did see a noticeable dip. Production was down about 38% compared to last year, around 5,979 units. And deliveries dropped by about 23% to just over 10,600.
Okay, that sounds not great on the surface.
It doesn't. But here's the context, the sort of good news side. Part of that slowdown is actually because the company is, and I quote, preparing for new models in 2026.
Ah, okay, so it's a planned slowdown, partly.
Seems that way. They're saying this temporary dip isn't expected to hit their full-year delivery goals. They're still aiming for somewhere between 40,000 and 46,000 for the year.
Okay, so what are these new models then? That's the big strategic shift.
That's the core of it, yes. Over the next 3 years, Rivian is planning to launch its new R2, R3, and R3X vehicles.
R2, R3, R3X. Got it.
And here's the really crucial part. All of these are going to cost less than their current lineup. Significantly less.
How much less are we talking?
Well, the R2, the first one expected, is projected to start around $45,000.
$45,000. Okay, that's a big difference from $70,000 plus.
It is. And that's the strategy. These cheaper EVs could potentially help Rivian massively expand its customer base.
Right, reach people who maybe liked the idea but couldn't stomach the current price.
Exactly. And maybe convince some of those more reluctant buyers, the ones still on the fence about switching from gas power.
So this is really about trying to get beyond that early adopter luxury niche.
Precisely. It's a key part, potentially, of getting more mainstream consumers to make that transition away from traditional cars, shifting Rivian from being seen as, maybe a nice-to-have luxury product to being a legitimate option in the broader car buying market. But, they have to get it right. And that kind of market shift, it's going to take time.
That makes sense. It's a bold move going for that mass market appeal. Does the research say anything about the risk there? Like, could they dilute their premium brand image by going cheaper?
That's a fair question. The sources don't explicitly dwell on brand dilution risk.
Yeah.
But they definitely emphasize how incredibly competitive that affordable EV market is.
Right. Tesla's there. The legacy automakers are jumping in.
Exactly. Companies like Tesla are already established in that space. And yeah, the traditional automakers are rapidly rolling out their own affordable EV options. So affordability is absolutely key for Rivian's growth plan.
But it's not enough on its own.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The real test will be if they can keep that unique Rivian appeal, the design, the quality, the adventure image, but deliver it at that lower price point and convince the people that their new models offer really compelling value compared to all the other choices popping up.
Got it. So wrapping this up then, the picture that's emerging for Rivian over the next, say, 3 years, it looks pretty challenging.
Yeah, challenging feels like the right word.
Likely to be, as we said, a bit bumpy due to all this stuff. Tariff uncertainty, rising costs, a lack of consistent federal support.
Absolutely. Those are the big external pressures. So if you're watching Rivian, the key things to track, I think.
What should we look for?
Well, first, can they consistently hit their production and delivery targets, especially as they manage this transition?
Okay.
And second, crucially, how successful are these new lower-priced vehicles? Do they actually attract new customers in big numbers?
And can they price them competitively enough?
Exactly. Can they stand out in what's becoming a really crowded field? Look, Rivian appears to be making the right strategic moves, planning for this shift.
But the execution is everything.
Execution's everything, and the next few years will really be the test. Can the company actually weather all these outside forces well enough to hit those ambitious goals they've set?
It's fascinating. So Rivian's journey here, trying to balance that initial luxury adventure appeal with this necessary push for mass market affordability, and doing it while navigating these really complex external forces like tariffs, shifting government policies, it really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
What does this whole situation, Rivian's specific challenges and strategies, tell you about the broader future of the entire electric vehicle industry, and maybe what it's really going to take for EVs to fundamentally reshape how we all get around?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Something to chew on. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really encourage you to keep exploring these fascinating and obviously very dynamic topics.